y'all, thanks for joining me today. I'm going to make a painting of a rocky outcrop in a waterfall. First I'm going to scrub in the rock formation in the foreground. I'm using raw umber for this, and I've thinned it a little bit with Gamsol. Doesn't really matter what brush you use. You just want to get it as spread out as possible. I'm using a flat here. And now I've got a fan brush because I was getting impatient. Just want to get as much of that color down as fast as I can and just spread it out as much as I can. Whenever you have a big dark object in your painting, it's best to get some kind of dark underpainting down. Alright, now I'm going to be painting in earnest with really thick, opaque color. Starting with the sky, I have mixed Ultramarine Blue and Titanium White. Now I'm just grabbing some white, mixing it in there. One, because I want the sky to be a little bit lighter, and also I want that paint to be a little bit thicker. Alright, now putting in the line of trees in the background. This is phthalo blue and Azo Yellow mixed with white, and then this darker green, I just didn't put any white in it. And there's a little bit more blue. And what I'm doing is I'm looking at a source photo here, taken at Willow River State Park in Wisconsin. And I'm just looking at the photo and getting a general idea of where these colors are and just scrubbing them in. And the idea is to just get your colors down as fast as you can. Don't think about refining edges or blending or anything like that. Just think about color. Just think about tonality. Okay, now in this empty area, I'm going to start putting in a big rock formation. And it's a big white rock wall that's reflecting a lot of light from the sun. So it's very yellow. And this is just Azo Yellow and Titanium White. And then I've got some burnt sienna here that I'm using for the shadows. This is essentially like crags and cracks and the undersides of rocks. Again, I'm just sketching it in. There's no need to think about detail. Pop in a few more trees. And here I'm also defining the upper edge of a waterfall that's going to be in that last empty area in the middle there where I haven't painted anything. And for that, I'm going to use a palette knife, and I'm just loading that palette knife up with white. You just need a bead of paint along the edge of the knife. And if you've ever watched a Bob Ross video, he does this in every video he's ever made. Just putting in a happy little waterfall. And I'm just going to grab some more white on that palette knife and really lay it on thick. And kind of grabbing those greens and yellows and pulling them down, and you get some sense of motion that way. And now I want this rock to appear more towards the midground as opposed to those trees, so I'm just popping in a little bit of dark there to just give it a little bit more sense of detail. And I'm going to do the same thing with some lights here. It's really reflecting a lot of light from the sun, so you're going to see how much white I add to this. And it's really going to give it this sense of a blinding reflection. Just darkening things up and refining the edge of the waterfall a little bit. And then there was a lot of paint right there, so I just scraped it off with the palette knife. No loss of detail. Alright, now I'm going to get into this rock formation. This is the star of the painting. And I'm using raw umber. I'm not using any black. You're not going to want to use black this early in the painting. You'll regret it if you do. And there's no need for it. This raw umber is going to be the darkest thing in the painting, so it's going to absolutely read as shadow. And now I'm just grabbing some of the green from those trees, mixing it with the raw umber, and putting in this large shadow here. And I'm going to have a lot of green in this rock because it's a mossy rock. And this dark green is going to read on shadow, and then in a minute I'm going to work some lighter greens into it, and it's really going to define the shapes here in a magical way. So I'm using the same brush, just grabbing that same green I had mixed before, and just pushing it into that dark shadow color that I had already laid down. And it's all mixing together, and you get that sense of a mossy stone in shadow. Now we're going to paint the underside of the rock. Again, this is just raw umber, not black. I'm going to go back and forth here a little bit between the green and the raw umber, because these two colors really define this whole section of the painting. So I'm just going to scrub in anywhere there's a mossy stone. And now I'm going to scrub in anywhere there's a dark shadow. And if you're painting along, I think you'll find this is the point where you really start to feel like you have a rhythm for things. After having already laid in so many shapes, these are just going to kind of fall out of your brush. You're not going to have to do any thinking about it or any measurements. Once you get into the rhythm of painting and you're just laying it down without thinking, that's the real pleasure of the whole thing. For me, that's why I do it. It's like that feeling of being completely at home with what you're doing. Okay, now I've got a secondary color for these stones, which is white and raw umber and a little bit of burnt sienna just to liven the color up. And I'm going to put this wherever there is light falling on these stones, and there is also no moss on these. From a naturalist perspective, I presume that's why there's no moss, is because these stones are in sunlight. And this is going to give a tremendous amount of dimension to this rock formation. And anytime I'm adding paint to an area that already has paint on it, you're either laying the paint on top or you're mixing. If you want to mix, then you use a thinner paint. If you want to lay that paint on top, it's got to be thick and you really have to load your brush up with it. Here I don't have to think about that because the paint on the surface is just scrubbed in. It's hardly even there at all. But at this point, I'm really thanking myself that I laid in that thin wash of raw umber. You would not want to do this on a white surface, because everywhere there was white, it would just shine through and the illusion would just wouldn't work. And that kind of light, watery green, that's just where the mossy stones are actually under the water. So there I'm just adding a lot of yellow to the green and some burnt sienna, and it just gives it that really nice muted tone. And now I'm painting the top of the water where you have glinting reflections of the sky. You're not really going to be able to do this with any kind of precision and get like little tiny glinting reflections. Not if you're painting in this manner anyway. So my goal is just scrub them in wherever they are in real life. In this case, wherever they are in the photo. And I zoomed in here because I want you to see how thick that paint is and the kind of brush I'm using. This is a dagger brush that's really old, and the bristles are just super hard and short. It's basically like painting with a blunt stick. Now I'm just getting some shadows in to really make those highlights pop. And this is the whole thing with tonalism. You don't need to think about little tiny details. As long as the colors are basically right and basically in the right place, you're going to get that illusion of reality. And now I'm at least going to try to get some small glinting reflections here. So I've got a smaller brush, but it's still a really hard hog bristle brush. And I'm just loading it up with white and a little bit of ultramarine. And at this point, you know, you're getting in those highlights, but you're also kind of shaping the whole thing, because the direction that the water flows defines the shape of those rocks. And because these trails of white are moving at a diagonal, you can see that that water is flowing downhill, so you can really see that those rocks are slanted in that direction. Okay, this is pretty much done. I'm just going to put in some finishing touches and take this moment to thank you for watching the video. I really love painting in this way. Like I said, I'm painting inside looking at a photograph, but this is a method that I learned to paint outdoors, and I think that that's where this method is really valuable. It's a great lesson to take your paints and some paper or a canvas and go outside and record that light. I think that learning how to paint a lighting situation is one of the most valuable lessons you can learn as a painter, and I think that's really a lesson that you need to learn outdoors. It's something that the sun will teach you how to do. But this is how I do it. This is what I learned by going outside with those paints and letting the sun teach me. So very happy to show you my process. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it informative. If you did, like it, subscribe to my channel, and click the bell so that you will be notified about my next video.
You think